Well, greetings, this is Dan Palmer coming at you from Melliodora. This, in fact, is the eucalyptus Melliodora tree that Melliodora is named after. And this little video is, I wanted to record this in advance of the Advanced Permaculture Design Process course you've gone and signed yourself up for. Maybe to share a few flavours of exactly what you're getting yourself involved in, but also to give you some stuff to mull over with the idea that it'll increase the value that you're hopefully able to get out of the course, and to give you a little homework assignment. So I wanted to start, there's about 3 things I wanted to cover. Two of them are distinctions. And so the idea is that permaculture is conscious design. Conscious is about awareness, about noticing, attending to things. And as we become more conscious of anything, we become more conscious of the differences it contains. So we notice the distinction or the difference between this and that. And so when we look at conscious design, one thing we're doing is we're poking around and probing around and looking at what design is, what design process is, and we'll be noticing differences together, and hopefully together deepening our consciousness, our awareness of healthy permaculture design process. Big part of the whole point of the course. And so I want to share 2 distinctions with you, and then give you a little bit of homework, 2 little homework assignments actually. They just doubled in number. And then an optional thing I'll invite you to do. So first distinction of the 2 is the distinction between process and outcome. It's one of these things that seems so stupidly obvious it's not even worth talking about, but I've found there's a lot in this little distinction. So the idea is that there's all this stuff in the world. There's water tanks and seats and rocks and beehives and tank stands and ladders and whatever else. Trees. Did I mention trees? And these are all outcomes of processes. And so we'll be, Melliodora itself, this whole place, the layout, all the gardens, the buildings, is an outcome that continues to unfold. But one thing we'll be doing on day 3 is walking around and not seeing the outcome, but looking at the outcome through the lens of the processes that David and Sue and others were using, and then look at how those processes generated this particular outcome, and how there's a whole lot of different processes, and how you can detect different qualities in the outcomes depending on the process that was used, which is a big take-home, that if we want to become more conscious of design process and permaculture, we start to realize that, oh wow, the nature of the processes we use has a huge effect. Like, in fact, it's the thing that determines what comes out of these processes. So for example, if we're trying to create nature mimicking systems, then some processes are better equipped or able to support us with generating that kind of outcome than others. So that's just purely something to start mulling over. Second distinction, and to me this was really important to float with you before we start, give you a bit of time to reflect on, is the distinction between process and project. So we all know what a project is. We're all involved in lots of projects, have been, are, will be. Permaculture, explicitly permaculture related and otherwise. And every single project involves process. There's process and processes inside every project. And of course, there's also outcomes. And one thing that happens sometimes when I ask people about the nature of the processes they use, because we all have processes and we have certain default ways of going about doing things, is they tend to kind of snap to grid or snap to telling me about the specifics of the project, of the house they built or the garden or the particular people involved, that kind of thing. When what I'm more interested in, particularly on this course, is the process. What stays the same from process to process to process as you move from one project to another. And for some weird reason in our culture, the process I mean, in some ways it makes sense, but the process stuff is under the radar. It's in a kind of a blind spot, and that can happen in permaculture too. Whereas if we want to be conscious designers, of course, we've got to shine the light of our attention and awareness back on these process dynamics, so we can start more reliably create the outcomes we want to create. So what I'm going to ask you to do as a homework assignment now, moving on, is to reflect on some of the projects you've been involved in the last recent months, years, whatever, perhaps a project you're involved in right now, and see if you can make a few notes about the process that you tend to use. So it's not going to be specific things like, I don't know, we poured the slab and then we, I don't know, dug the driveway out or something like that. It'll be more like we consulted relevant experts, we drew a plan, we drew a flow chart, we marked something out, we noticed something wasn't quite right, so we changed it, you know, that kind of thing. And so it's really about what you paid attention to and what you did, and the order in which you paid attention to things and did things. If you could do that I guarantee you it'll mean you can get more value out of the course, because what big part of what I'll be bringing, both David and I, but it's a real passion of mine, is to focus in on what is the nature of our process. Let's bring it out onto the table and shine the light of our attention on it and notice stuff. And wow, every process has its own internal ecology. It's like an ecosystem, and that we can understand, we can become more aware of and understand the ecology of our processes in ways that really kind of blow the ceiling out of the way in terms of what's possible with outcomes. So I hope that makes sense. If you could have a think about, what are your process dynamics? What do you tend to do? Some of you might emphasize thinking more. Some of you might notice that you often make space for feeling. Some of you have both, you know, whatever the case may be. General process characteristics. It might be like a dot point list of, who knows, 6 to 10 things. And it's the reflection as much as the actual, it's the process as much as the actual outcome of the dot point. So that's homework assignment number 1. Hey, I just thought I'd drop this in because I remembered that another thing that happens when I ask people to describe their process stuff to me is that often they'll repeat back something they learned on a permaculture design course or read in a book, which has its place and all that. But there's often a difference between what you might have taught, or even possibly what you think you do, I found this, and what you actually do. It can be hard to bring what you actually do repeatedly in terms of the process out into the open. So I just wanted to mention that so you don't get too seduced or sidetracked or distracted by some other process description you've seen somewhere else. I mean, use it as it to the extent it does fit, and to the extent it does inform what you actually do. But that's the focus. Okay, good luck. Homework assignment number 2. On the first day, we're going to be doing an exercise where we're going to be looking at David's 12 permaculture design principles in a new way, in a way that you probably haven't looked at them before. I hadn't a couple of years back when David first suggested this. And what we'll be doing is, rather than applying them, so I'll give you an example. Catch and store energy, right? One of the design principles. Often when that's talked about, or you've seen David do a presentation or anyone else, there'll be a picture of something like a water tank. There's a water tank under there. Or a pile of firewood. Or, people might talk about a beehive. There's another water tank. Or even a tree and plants and photosynthesis as ways of catching and storing energy, which is great. But on the exercise I'm talking about, we're going to ask you to apply principles, including catch and store energy, to design process, And so I'd invite you to have a go and pull out a list of the 12 principles and think about each of those in terms of how we might apply that principle to design process itself. And some of them it's going to be fairly obvious, like observe and interact. Others, like use edges and value the marginal, or even obtain a yield. Catch and store energy will be a bit trickier. And I'll give you one example, I'll give you one clue here as to what I'm the sort of thing I mean. So catch and store energy. An example of what I mean is that if early in a design process, we can support ourselves or the people we're working with to articulate their deep goals or intentions for the project. What we're doing is we're catching and we're storing their motivations. We're catching, in a sense, we're catching and storing energy that later on down the track we can re-access by, if it's written down, for example, that can be looked at, and so that energy can be utilized as necessary. Hopefully that makes sense. So we're applying David's 12 permaculture design principles to design process itself. See how you go. Again, it's really about giving you a chance for this task to land and to be in process and reflect on it as much as coming up with something. But you'll be asked to present this stuff. So if at least some of you have actually got something to share, that would be brilliant. Last thing. I think this is the last thing, and I'll leave you be. So yeah, last thing is we'd invite you all. This is totally optional, but I'm sure for some of you, you'd be really interested in doing this. As was mentioned on the course blurb, we'll make space and time on the course to for peer-to-peer feedback on actual design related projects that you have going on, whether they're for landscape or in a social context or an educational context, whatever they are. If you want to prepare some of your design diagrams or photos of the process so far, anything like that, there'll be space on the wall, and there'll be a time, probably on the morning of day 4, but we'll see how we go, to share those with each other and to get feedback. Where if you can bring that distinction I mentioned earlier between project and process. So yeah, we want to know about the project, but it'd be real. Like often people come to me with the design plan, for example, and ask for my feedback. And like I can see the plan, but I can't see the process. So I want to know, how did you get to this layout? What was the process? Can you tell me about that? Is there anything you can share about why the path is that shape, or why the pond is there, and so on? So if you could think about ways you could start to externalize that or make that visible, as well, of course, all that stuff is great, the plans, the photos, bring that too, but we'll be really focusing on the process dynamics as the title and the focus of this course. Okay, thanks so much for your time. I came here to Melidora to prepare today. David's caught up with installing their new wetback wood stove. I think they actually burnt the last one out because they use it so much. They had a second-hand one, and so he's getting on with that today. And so I'm doing some preparation, including the video, and I'm really pumped. I'm literally buzzing, like those bees over there, buzzing with excitement about this course. It's one of the highlights of my year, and I just can't wait to spend the 4 days together, to collaborate. We've got an awesome venue this year, and to really support each other, to grow and evolve as permaculture designers. So all the best, happy homework, happy mulling over, and we'll catch you in a couple of weeks. Ciao.